Hi everyone, welcome back to science class. So guys, we've been working on composting for the past week, so we're going to continue on that. But let's go over that really cool experiment that we did last week in science and talk about those compost baggies that we made together. So who can tell me what were some of the things that we put into our compost bag? We broke down some food, right? We had some leftover food. We put in some salad and we put in some bread, and we added two more things to help with the decomposition or the breakdown, right? So we break down something into small little parts. That's called decomposition, right? So when we are composting, we help to break down all that food waste, right? The leftover food, we help to break it down into smaller parts to make the fertilizer. So we added in some of our leftovers. What else did we add to our baggies to help that decomposition or that breakdown? Who can remember? We added some water, and we also added a straw for the air to help too, right? Because air that gets to old food or waste helps to break everything down. And then when it all breaks down, there's a lot of minerals and vitamins that can go into the soil to help more plants grow. So it's almost just like recycling, but with food, right? Composting is very similar to recycling, but in a different way. We break down all the food to put into different fertilizers to help different plants grow, right? So it's a really cool way, and a different way that we can help the environment, right? So let's take a look at what we did last week. Let's share my screen right here, and I'm going to show you a picture just to refresh everybody's memory of what we worked on, right? So here are those compost baggies that we did last week as an experiment together. You see in here we have some food, right? We broke down all the different food, we put it in a little bag, and then we added some water and we put a little straw to get some air in there to help with that breakdown of all those natural things, right? So that's one way we can compost in small little pieces. Instead of having a big compost, we can make classroom compost or small garden compost. So this is just one way we can do that, right? All right, guys. So we are going to check out this video together all about composting and what composting is. And we are going to start by going through our lesson. And let's review our lesson objective before we jump into our video. So our lesson objective is students will define compost and identify what items can go into a compost and which can be recycled. Our essential questions are: what is composting? What is recycling? What things can we compost? What things can we recycle? And how does composting help the environment? Okay, so we're going to go into our video now. We're going to check it out together, and we're going to watch this cool video about how compost is made.
Look out! Here comes another load. Oh, hello. I'm George the foreman. Welcome to our compost bin. This is very lucky indeed, because you've arrived just in time for another delivery. And now I can show you just how compost is made with the help of some of my family and friends. Right then, let's start by taking a look at some of the everyday stuff that we can turn into compost. Everyday stuff that you're kind enough to bring to our bin. Great! There's a good mix of greens and browns in here. Like any recipe, good compost needs a mix of the right ingredients. The apple cores, vegetable peelings and tea bags, for instance, are called greens. They're quick to rot down and add moisture to the bin. Things like egg boxes, cardboard and fallen leaves are called browns, and these provide fibre and make useful air pockets in the mixture. As you can see, Before this lot even had time to settle, Ferdy the fruit fly and all his mates are all over the place helping to start the process by breaking down the greens. Oh. Morning, Brian. See, over there, they're brandling worms, eating their way through the rotting debris. Unlike normal earthworms, which like soil, Brian and his friends prefer this lovely, rich environment and can eat up to half their own body weight in a day. Their tunnelling also provides little airways for oxygen to get through so that we can all breathe down here. Oh, look, there's Pippa Ant and her colony tucking in as well. Tuck in, young Pip. Hopefully there's plenty more where that came from. Phew, things are certainly starting to warm up around here. Now, at this level, in the first few days, tiny microbes such as Beryl and Bertie bacteria here, so small that you can fit 1 billion of them on a teaspoon, also help break down the waste, making it easier for my friends to eat and slowly turn it into compost. Let's go down to the next level and see how our compost is developing.
All right, guys. And so as you can see, we just even had someone coming in to collect all of our recycling here, right? So we talk about recycling and composting, and we try to do it in school. We do it at home all the time, right? So we always try to get that done. And so now we're going to talk about all the different ways we can compost. In our video, we learned about the different processes, right? And how long it takes to compost. There's different phases of composting, right? We talked about that top layer, and then there's harder stuff that needs to break down or decompose. And so that's like a lower layer, and it takes longer and longer the bigger or the more we need to compost, right? So we can go through, and now we're going to work on our Jamboard together, and we're going to go over the different things that we can compost and the different things that we recycle, right? Just like we have in school all the time, we have our recycling bins, and even at lunch, sometimes we have our compost bins. If you remember from last year, we would often compost all the materials that we didn't eat, right? So all the foods we didn't eat, all the different things we didn't eat. So let's go through together and talk about those different things that we could recycle and those different things that we can compost. So let's go over our compost definition. When vegetable waste or plants are broken down to make fertilizer, right? So when we are decomposing something, we're using compost. So that's that breaking down that we saw in the video, right? We want to break down all the different leftover food, any leftover grass clippings, right? Any kind of things like that. So let's go through now and let's see some of those things that we can compost. And what are some of those items that we might be able to compost? Here's a picture of some various things. So if we look through this picture, we want to identify all the things that would be considered that brown or green materials that we learned about in our video. So we would say something, point over here, we would say something like an orange peel, right? Maybe an apple core, a leftover strawberry, a watermelon rind, and some lettuce that we had actually used in our compost baggies, right? Remember how we used lettuce in our compost baggies in our experiment previously. So those are all the things that you would compost. Now let's go over our recycling definition. Recycling is the process of changing materials into new things or objects. So we know what we recycle, right? We have our blue bins that we always throw our recycling into that we don't want to throw into the garbage, right? Because we don't want to pollute. So what are some of those things? Now keep in mind, we just went over all the things we compost, so we can remember that we're not going to recycle any sort of foods, any sort of grass, right? Any of that brown or green stuff that we want to use for composting, where we want to make fertilizer to bring nutrients to plants and trees. So what are some things that we might recycle? Let's take a look here. What are some things that we do recycle, that we can recycle? We can definitely recycle those water bottles and those tin cans, right? We have 2 tin cans here. For sure, those boxes or packages, right? Absolutely. So those are all things that we can recycle. Awesome. Okay, guys. So now we're going to break up into our reading groups. Mr. E is going to take his reading group into a breakout room. I'm going to have my reading group with me, and we're going to go over an article all about how students can recycle and compost. Excuse me. Okay. So we talked a little bit earlier about how we used to compost last year in school. And when we had leftover lunch materials, we would compost together. So let's go over this article together. And we're going to learn how much food and plastic products are in garbage. Excuse me again. Okay. So in Charlotte, North Carolina, Whitewater Middle School students in Charlotte, North Carolina, got to look at garbage. They put on gloves and they squished through 200 pounds of lunch food their classmates threw away. All of it was headed for the landfill. They counted untouched salads, fruits, and rolls. They waded through the trash, including styrofoam trays. Whitewater switched to compostable paper trays after the project. Whitewater added an environmental science class this year, but this wasn't just a school exercise. Landfill space is running out, says Laurette Hall, a county worker. At Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, CMS, they create a lot of trash. There's more than 10,000 tons a year. Let's start with the question. What happened to the hard plastic plates and trays? Some CMS schools still use them, says Catherine Beam, who works for the district. But there are two big problems. One is hiring workers, and schools having a hard time filling dishwasher jobs, Beam said. The other is speed. Some schools are overcrowded. They need students to dump everything fast so the next lunch group can come in. Styrofoam-like trays make things easy, but they take up a lot of landfill space. Also, the government thinks they may release bad chemicals into the air. So why not switch to paper? It only costs a few more cents, says Beam. That doesn't sound like much, but CMS uses 2 million trays a year. Switching to paper would cost $50,000 a year. Students learned a lot from the project. They also learned a huge lesson in unexpected consequences. They saw untouched salads and fruit in the trash. Why? So guys, when we are talking about wanting to compost and we notice that there's all this leftover salad and food, instead of throwing it out, what's something we might now be able to do with it? What did the students learn that they could do with all that food instead of throwing it into a landfill and causing the landfills to get hugely backed up and filled and ruin the environment? What are some things we're learning about this week that might help that problem and solve it? We can compost, right? So bringing a compost program, also using trays that are made out of paper that we can also compost, would be a fantastic idea. Excellent. Yes. All right, guys, we went through our reading. You guys are going to read it on your own one time, and then we're going to fill out the quiz together. All right? Awesome job, guys. You did a fantastic job today. Awesome work.